Charles Chevelle.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'd like to follow my friend and colleague Katrina Shanks by repeating her acknowledgement of the work that a number of people have done on this legislation. The Minister, Simon Power, has carried on the reform agenda in this area that was begun by Leanne Dalzell in office. It is, I think, a matter that the House can take some pleasure in, that there has been widespread support across the House for this level of reform, and I think it is appropriate to acknowledge both Ms Dalzell and Mr Power in my beginning remarks. I hope that, given the announcement that Mr Power will be departing this place, that we won't see a slackening off in this agenda, because there is a lot more work to be done. There are a lot of reforms in the financial markets area that need to be completed. I've tried to bring one of those necessary reforms to the House, that being the bill to regulate the activities of loan sharks. And Sir, I just want to say a few words at the outset about that bill, because if we are to take the previous Speaker at her word, which we must, then everybody in the House should be serious about comprehensive financial markets reform. And what we've achieved so far is to get some way along reforming, if you like, the middle band of the market, the finance companies. And I see Mr Boscawen's in the House. When he was on the Select Committee, he said some fine words about the need for reform in this area, and I hope that he will follow those words through now that he holds the warrant as Minister of Consumer Affairs. Because one of the areas that still badly needs reform, particularly in these straitened economic times, is the position of those at the lowest end of the market who have to go to fringe or holiday lenders in order to get credit from week to week, because they just can't make ends meet. Now, this House had an opportunity last year to try to complete the suite of reforms at the lower end of the market, and it didn't do so. Members of the ACT and national parties chose not to regulate loan sharks, fringe lenders, holiday pay lenders. And that's a matter, I think, that does bring some shame on this House. If we are to see comprehensive reform in this area, if we are going to look after all New Zealanders, not just the so-called mums and dads investors, the middle-class investors who have not been well treated by the market and do need to see proper protection, but also the lower end of the market, then we need urgently to revisit the issue of. And Sir, will be bringing measures up by submitting them to the members' ballot on a regular basis in order to ensure that this House doesn't forget the urgent need for us to deal also with that end of the market. Because if we are to legislate for all New Zealanders, then that is something we must do. Now, Sir, previous speakers have said that the Labour Party supports both these bills. I just want to make a couple of comments about the Securities, Trustees and Statutory Supervisors bill. I'd like to acknowledge the work that the Select Committee's done and also compliment the officials on the committee by very competent officials, and acknowledge the assistance that they've given. So what the bill does is address a number of weaknesses that have been identified in our supervision regime for trustees and statutory supervisors. There's a licensing regime that will be brought into place by the of those who are in charge of another vulnerable sector in our community, those people who live in retirement villages. And there would be amendments to a number of acts, the Retirement Villages Act, the Securities Act, the Unit Trusts Act. This new regime would be that under the bill, the intent that this role, the supervisory role, would actually be taken over by the Financial Markets Authority once it's established. The bill follows on from the conclusions of both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which reported in 2004 on this general area, and consultations that were subsequently undertaken by the Ministry of Economic Development in the review of financial products and providers in 2006. Now, the fundamental finding that was made at this time was that New Zealand just places too much reliance on private supervision, basically the corporate trustees, and that there's really no regime in our law. So the bill would remove the automatic right for the 6 appointed approved trustees under statute to supervise debt issuers and some investment schemes, and introduce a licensing regime for trustees as well. It will make it an offence or a statutory supervisor without a licence, so that a person who does commit an offence will be liable on summary conviction for a fine not exceeding $300,000. So it is a serious penalty regime. There are a number of provisions designed to ensure that trustees, statutory supervisors and unit trustees comply with their obligations, and the enforcement mechanism, be it the Commission or the Financial Markets Authority, can seek penalties and compensatory orders against anyone who fails to comply. So clearly there will be a better accountability regime that is brought into place by this legislation. And I'd just like to refer to a speech that was given by Leanne Dalzell back in August last year, when she spoke about the improvements that we hoped to see across the market, both by the enactment of this legislation and by bringing into being this comprehensive new regulator of the sector, the Financial Markets Authority. This is to absorb the functions currently taken into account or performed by the Securities Commission, the Ministry of Economic Development's National Enforcement Unit, the Government Actuary, and even the New Zealand Stock Exchange as far as its market discipline functions are concerned. Now, Leanne Dalzell said the Minister has said that the authority will have grunt, and I welcome that. She went on to say, I'm constantly discount our criminal justice system appears to afford the white-collar criminal over all other criminals, even though the wealth they have destroyed makes the proceeds of house burglaries pale into insignificance by comparison. Leanne Dalzell went on, I think we should allow our courts to impose what I now call the Madoff sentence for the most egregious cases. And there are some people who should never be allowed to fundraise from the public ever again, or claim the protection of limited liability against creditors, and those are the people against whom fraud has been proven. There should be no second chances under these circumstances. Now, sir, the Select Committee, as I said, did comprehensive work on this bill. They received and considered 18 submissions, and they heard 8 oral submitters. They dealt with the issue of the inclusion of retirement village statutory supervisors, and obviously that recommendation met with some approval because the House is dealing with the 2 pieces of legislation in tandem. Sir, just to conclude my short contribution, this is necessary regulation of a sector. It's why it's receiving support from across the House. It isn't comprehensive regulation. There is still much work to do, as I said, particularly at the bottom end of the market where our most vulnerable people still aren't properly protected. The previous speaker claimed that this was part of some comprehensive economic plan. Frankly, that's a risible claim. There is no such plan. What this is sensible regulation that goes some of the way that is needed in our markets. And for that reason, and that reason alone, it is supported by the Labour Party.